Este tramo de Park Avenue en el Upper East Side de Manhattan es el barrio más rico de la ciudad de Nueva York. Aquí vive lo más alto de la escala social, la crema innata, los más ricos. Pero esta calle representa mucho más que dinero, representa poder político. Los ricos que viven aquí no solo han usado su dinero para comprar autos lujosos, jets privados y mansiones, también lo han usado para poner el juego a su favor. En los últimos 30 años han gozado de una prosperidad sin precedentes, de un sistema que controlan cada vez más. Pero unos 10 minutos al norte, esa Park Avenue termina en el río Harlem. Del otro lado del agua hay otra Park Avenue. Este es el sur del Bronx, que alberga el distrito electoral más pobre de Estados Unidos. Hay 700,000 personas en este distrito. Casi 40% de ellas viven en la pobreza, con menos de $40 por día. Desde aquí, los últimos 30 años, la vista ha sido muy diferente a la Park Avenue de Manhattan. Aquí la gente ha visto cómo bajan los salarios y cómo se eleva desmedidamente el costo de todo. Perdieron sus empleos en la recesión causada por los banqueros al otro lado del río. Vieron a sus hijos batallar en escuelas que quebraban y acabaron incluso peor que hace una generación. Pero Estados Unidos sigue siendo una tierra de oportunidades, ¿o no? Un lugar donde cualquiera puede llegar a la cima si está dispuesto a trabajar y a tener metas altas. Eso es lo que hace grande a este país. ¿No es eso lo que nos decimos? Pero en el Estados Unidos de hoy, ¿cuáles son las probabilidades de que alguien que comienza su vida en esta Park Avenue termine viviendo en esta Park Avenue?
Let's imagine that you're invited to a game of Monopoly. And you arrive at this game to find out that all of the property's been divided up. All of the money's already been handed out. But you're told, hey, go ahead and sit down, play the game. We're going to give you a chance to play just like everyone else. There are some in society that have a lot of access, a lot of social mobility, a lot of resources to do the things that they want, as opposed to other people who are more disadvantaged, more underprivileged, don't have the same levels of resources.
Paul Piff es psicólogo social de la Universidad de California en Berkeley, que estudia la psicología de la riqueza y las consecuencias de la desigualdad en nuestra sociedad. Leímos respecto a un experimento que realizó y atrajo nuestro interés.
Oh wait, I get $200 because I just...
Oh, yeah.
Monopoly se convirtió en un éxito durante la Gran Depresión. Es un juego de capitalismo implacable e inescrupuloso. De acuerdo con el sueño americano, todos tienen la misma oportunidad. Empiezan con la misma cantidad de dinero y la misma oportunidad de triunfar. Ganar es una mezcla de suerte y habilidad. Para su experimento, Piff cambió el juego dándole a un jugador una gran ventaja.
So there are two players, they don't know each other. You flip a coin to determine your position. So it's random, almost like your emergence into the world is random, whether you land in this family or this other family. If you were the rich person, you got a lot more money. You got 2 times as much money. When you pass go, you collect $200. You would get to roll both dice, so you're allowed to move around the board quicker.
How many 500s did you have?
Just one.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I have 3.
Now, if you're on the low end, we really hit you hard. You got half the money. When you passed go, you collected half the salary.
I'm gonna lose pretty soon.
You only got to roll 1 die, so you're moving around the board very, very slowly. The other person's just whizzing around you, collecting $200 every couple of turns.
I'm gonna get another $200 again.
I know.
Aún en un juego que está abiertamente manipulado, los jugadores ricos inevitablemente exhiben un sentido de tener derecho a todo. Comen más de los pretzels cuidadosamente colocados. Llegan a creer que merecen ganar.
I'm gonna buy out this whole board.
Y no muestran preocupación por la mala suerte de los jugadores pobres, aun cuando los jugadores pobres no tienen la más remota posibilidad de ganar.
Lose all your money soon.
The idea of the American dream. is that everyone's got an equal opportunity. You just got to decide to play. But in fact, there are large groups of people that experience the game as unfair. The opportunity's not there. All the rules have been decided, the property's already been bought up, and the money's already in the hands of the other players.
Get rebound. Go.
First time to everything.
That's my goal.
I'm Michael Jordan.
I'm Ray Allen.
Almost all families start out with wanting the same things for their children. They want them to be safe, they want them to be happy, and they want them to be successful and healthy. But even before birth, so many kids start that race behind. They come into a neighborhood that's unsafe. Maybe they're in an overcrowded apartment. They don't have healthy nutrition. They might have medical issues that aren't being addressed. I would say their number one challenge is just a lack of opportunities in general.
En partes del sur del Bronx, el desempleo ha llegado a 19% y muchas familias luchan tan solo por poner comida en la mesa. El pastor Colin Dunkley y su esposa April atienden un almacén de comida en el sur del Bronx, que alimenta a unas 200 familias cada semana.
I like helping people. I like serving the people. I like helping the people. If there's something we can do to bless them, that's what we're going to do.
What you typically get, the vegetables in a can, beans in a can, bags of rice. Sometimes we get the little sippy Capri Sun juices. We'll put those in a bag for the kids.
Pero no tienen ni remotamente lo suficiente para cumplir con la demanda. Cuando fuimos, se quedaron sin comida en 15 minutos.
There is no more food at this time. You can come back next Monday at 2 o'clock. That's it, Mommy, that's it. No, sir, I'm sorry, no more.
It is very, very hard to pull yourself out of extreme poverty in the United States. It almost never happens. This runs completely counter to what people's notion of America has been for a very long time. We think of ourselves as the land of opportunity. Mobility in the United States lags most other advanced industrial democracies.
When I was growing up, the image of America, and the self-image, was of a vast middle-class country. Of course, there was a small, rich group, and there were some poor, but America prided itself and understood that its health was because of a vast middle class. We're not that kind of society anymore.
Siempre ha habido una brecha entre los más ricos en nuestra sociedad y todos los demás. Pero en los últimos 30 años algo cambió. Esa brecha se convirtió en el Gran Cañón.
The incomes of people at the lower end stagnated. And disproportionate amount of the growth in the economy has accrued to those at the upper end.
Así se veía la economía de Estados Unidos en las décadas siguientes a la Segunda Guerra Mundial. Los ingresos de todos aumentaban con grandes porciones para los estadounidenses promedio. Pero desde finales de la década de 1970, el 90% de abajo ha visto su porción totalmente devorada por el 1% de hasta arriba.
The wealthy are getting an enormous percentage of all of the gains in the entire economy. When I talk about the wealthy, I'm talking about like in the thousands of people.
Miles puede ser una exageración. En 2010, solo 400 de los estadounidenses más ricos controlaban la riqueza que la mitad inferior de los hogares estadounidenses, es decir, 150 millones de personas. La pregunta es, ¿qué hará la gente de arriba con todo ese dinero?
There is a little tiny group, and it's probably 1% of the 1%. Those people are concentrated in a very small number of places. New York has been one of those places since the early 19th century. It has been a world city with world-class fortunes, and it has been a magnet for people who live in the 1% of the 1%. I was in a taxi going down Fifth Avenue looking for the richest apartment building in New York. There were about 10 buildings that were on the initial list. 740 Park became the epicenter of the people who ruled the world, truly the masters of the universe. They all live at 740 Park. It was known before my book as the Rockefeller Building, but in fact, Rockefeller was not one of the original people in the building. It was built by Jackie Kennedy's grandfather, James T. Lee, in a consortium with a group of the people who were considered to be responsible for the market crash of 1929 and the depression that followed. And then it became kind of the Standard Oil building. It was a building where lots of Standard Oil executives and their friends all lived. It was truly considered the holy grail for a certain kind of wealthy New Yorker. Now, the largest category in 740 Park are hedge fund guys. And they're the people with the most money now. They're the equivalent of the oil people from the 30s.
These guys ruled the world. You know, they are multi-billionaires of, the CEOs of the major corporations in the world.
Este portero alguna vez trabajó en el 740 de Park Avenue. Aceptó ser entrevistado con la condición de que se cubriera su cara y se distorsionara su voz.
To work at 740, you really need to know somebody within the business. You're working at the top building in the world. It's only 31 units, it's not a lot of residents, but they're high-tempered and, you have to have a thick skin to work there. You're going to be dealing with detestable people and you're going to be dealing with billionaires. You need to know everything about the residents. What time they wake up to go down to Wall Street, whose car is which, who likes to get their own door, who gets in the passenger seat, who gets in the back seat. These things don't seem like a big thing to me and you, but even a minor mishap, you'll be fired straight away.
Who are some of the key tenants in the building now?
You've got John Thain, the CEO who presided over the downfall of Merrill Lynch. Ezra Merkin, who was the feeder to Bernie Madoff. David Koch, who is the richest person in the building. And of course, Steve Schwarzman, the poster child of capitalistic greed in the last 10 years.
El multimillonario Stephen Schwarzman, uno de los reyes del capital privado, vive en el departamento más lujoso del 740 de Park Avenue. Schwarzman era director ejecutivo en Lehman Brothers antes de ser cofundador del grupo Blackstone. Es uno de los directores ejecutivos más destacados en presionar para hacer políticas fiscales que favorezcan a los más ricos.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the 66th annual Alfred E. Smith Memorial Foundation dinner. We call it Occupy Waldorf.
Steve Schwarzman lives in the apartment that had previously been owned by John D. Rockefeller Jr. It's a sprawling apartment. It's 37 rooms. Lavish beyond your wildest imagining, 20,000 square feet.
Schwarzman pagó menos de $30 millones por este departamento, una ganga para un magnate de Wall Street con una fortuna de más de $5,000 millones.
If a few people, do really well, why is that such a big deal? Isn't that just proof of the American dream? You work hard and you're successful.
We as a society have very complex views about economic inequality. Americans are not of the view that all inequalities of wealth or income are unjust. And in fact, they think if you work harder, if you seize opportunities, then you should be able to get ahead.
Jacob Hacker es científico político de Yale y coautor de Winner Take All Politics, que afirma que esta extraordinaria acumulación de riqueza de la clase alta no solo es cuestión de trabajo arduo, es cuestión de los intereses de los ricos que usan el sistema político para poner las leyes a su favor.
There's been a reinforcing cycle. Those at the top have done well. They've invested in policies that are favorable to them, and they've done even better, and then they've churned a lot of that money back into politics.
Para entender cómo el dinero maneja las reglas en Washington, buscamos la imagen de la corrupción política, el ex cabildero Jack Abramoff. Hace unos años realizamos una filmación muy crítica de Jack. Ahora, tras haber pasado cerca de 4 años en la prisión federal por conspiración para sobornar a funcionarios públicos, está recorriendo el país tratando de promover una reforma.
I wish I could tell you that in the midst of all of my lobbying activity, I came to an epiphany, but I didn't. It, unfortunately for me, required my demise.
Jack Abramoff has pled guilty to federal corruption charges.
But eventually I decided to look honestly at the past activities I had engaged in. I also systemically looked at the overall picture and realized the system itself was really badly in disrepair.
I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill.
Este video de Schoolhouse Rock de 1975 aún se usa para enseñar a muchos estadounidenses sobre cómo debería funcionar su gobierno.
Some folks back home decided they wanted a law passed, so they called their local congressman, and he said, "You're right, there ought to be a law." Then he sat down and wrote me out and introduced me to Congress, and I became a bill.
It was very cute, but it's not what goes on in Washington. The bill is very rarely, I would say never, typed up by the congressman after hearing from a diverse group of citizens. You know, the staff are busy, the congressman busy, and so they frequently in the past and still avail themselves of the services, let's call them, of the lobbyists to write these bills. The lobbyists will bring in the exact draft of what they want because they want to make sure it is exactly what they need.
Now, as a lobbyist, what was your leverage in terms of getting members to sponsor the bills that you had written?
Well, a lobbyist needs to get to the decision maker, the congressman and the staff, and that involves, unfortunately, financial conveyances.
One of the dirty little secrets in Washington today is how much time members of the House and Senate spend every week, not just in the election season, but all the time, year-round, on the telephone, asking people for money. It's begging for money. It's a sad spectacle.
When you have campaigns that are costing tens of millions of dollars, the people who have the money want something back. Money is being used to buy results. That is the problem. That's how I used money. I know what I was doing.
¿Cuándo comenzó todo esto? ¿Cuándo tomó el dinero el control de Washington?
It really has to do with the mobilization of business that occurred in the mid-1970s. Because of Ralph Nader and other corporate reformers, business was pushed back strongly on the defensive.
Air and water pollution control, safer cars and highways, and many, many better ways of doing things. We're a rich country, but we're not distributing it for our major public needs.
Ralph Nader, a deeply, deeply hated figure by corporate America in those days, scared them to death.
And what did business do? Well, they followed the prescription of the future Supreme Court Justice Lewis Powell, who wrote an influential memo for the Chamber of Commerce saying that business needed to organize. Businessmen of the world unite.
Lewis Powell, abogado corporativo de la industria del tabaco, fue asignado a la Suprema Corte por Richard Nixon en 1972. Antes de unirse a la Corte, Powell envió un memorándum confidencial a la Cámara de Comercio de Estados Unidos. Ahí, Powell señaló a Ralph Nader como el mayor enemigo de la industria estadounidense y describió un mapa para la adquisición corporativa de las instituciones públicas de Estados Unidos. Invitó a las grandes empresas a ser más agresivas en cuanto a moldear la política y las leyes estadounidenses.
Corporate America heeded that call. You saw an enormous buildup during the 1970s in corporate lobbying power.
They invested enormous new sums in politics. They started to change their strategies, moving from New York, in the case of one big business organization, to Washington, developing personal relationships between CEOs and politicians.
El resultado fue un cambio de políticas que beneficiaban a la clase media y baja a políticas que convenían a los intereses de los ricos.
Lobbying was a $400 million a year industry in the 1980s, and it's about a $4 billion industry today.
Washington is almost owned and operated by the U.S. corporate sector at this point. There are so many billions of dollars of spending on lobbying. There are so many lobbyists that are in the room writing the regs, writing the laws right now. There is so much financing of political campaigns. There are so many bought politicians.
Un ejemplo de la influencia que un grupo pequeño de multimillonarios puede tener en el gobierno está en el Código Fiscal, y es la disposición de intereses generados, que permite a los gestores de fondos de inversión libre y de capitales privados como Steve Schwarzman pagar una tasa tributaria de 15%. A diferencia de las ganancias de capital normal, no se requiere que arriesguen su dinero.
When it's explained to people, they think it's crazy. The most highly paid financial executives get taxed at a rate lower than your mom and pop grocery. It is in the tax code because of the incredibly effective lobbying of the financial industry.
Okay, it was a question about carried interest being taxed at a lower rate. We sort of look at this as sort of an issue that's now in the political world, and you know, it will be solved in that world. We don't have much of a say in that.
Schwartzman went to Capitol Hill yesterday and stood outside the Senate chamber lobbying senators. Schwartzman was there to fight against higher taxes on so-called carried interest.
From 2006 on, every Democratic leader and president, in the case of President Obama, has said, we're going to get rid of this.
Let's ask hedge fund managers to stop paying taxes that are lower on their rates than their secretaries.
And then magically it manages to survive. Before you know it, the congressional session has ended, and oh my God, we ran out of time. We didn't get to it. We'll do it next time.
It appears the Democrats have completed their takeover of Capitol Hill.
Aun cuando los demócratas controlaban las dos cámaras del Congreso, no pudieron cerrar la brecha del interés generado. La pregunta es, ¿por qué?
It passed the House twice, but in the Senate, the hedge funds had a pal in Charles Schumer of New York, the senator from Wall Street, as he was known for many years.
Charles Schumer es uno de los senadores más poderosos del país y ha recaudado más fondos para campañas de la industria financiera que cualquier otro demócrata que esté actualmente en el Congreso.
Schumer became famous for his ability to gain Wall Street dollars. That's why he was elevated within the Democratic leadership, is because he was such an effective fundraiser.
Schumer in that period was the chairman of the Senate Democratic Campaign Committee, which, you got to give the guy credit, he turned this into an absolute money machine.
Schumer ayudó al Partido Demócrata a recaudar cantidades récord de Wall Street. En junio de 2007, mientras el Senado consideraba la legislación para cerrar la brecha del interés generado, Schumer entró en un frenesí de recaudación de fondos. En ese mes, reunió más de $1 millón de firmas de fondos de inversión libre y capital privado como Blackstone. El proyecto de ley del interés generado nunca vio la luz.
Schumer just buried the idea. It never came up for a vote in a committee or on the floor of the Senate. It just disappeared.
Well, I believe that income equality, jobs, the economy has been the issue for a long time.
Schumer consistently says, oh, I don't think this is a good provision. We need to change it.
Are you willing to vote to get rid of the carried interest provision,
Yes.
which allows people
Yes.
like Mitt to make that kind of tax break?
But we need to make sure that every possible group that might get a similar kind of preferential tax treatment is also dealt with.
But any carried interest, whether it's venture capital or oil and gas or anything else.
He's basically saying, you know, we need to overhaul the whole tax code, which of course guarantees that you'll never reach agreement.
Every senator pays attention to the industries with big footprints in their states, as they should.
Al defender esta brecha, el senador Schumer dice a menudo que simplemente representa a sus electores, los banqueros. Pero ¿qué hay de estos otros electores? Los oficiales de policía, los enfermeros, los bomberos. Ellos ayudan a salvar la vida de los neoyorquinos, incluyendo a los administradores de fondos de inversión libre. Pero el senador de Nueva York no considera injusto que un bombero veterano pague una tasa tributaria casi del doble que un multimillonario con fondos de inversión libre.
Chuck Schumer is thinking, I need to make sure that I represent these deep-pocketed Wall Street interests if I want my party and me to be successful. And that, I think, is a perfect example of the way in which money talks in American politics today.
Y el dinero de nadie habla más fuerte que el de David Koch. Este magnate petrolero de derecha con una fortuna de $25,000 millones es el habitante más rico del 740 de Park Avenue. David y su hermano Charles dirigen Koch Industries, una de las empresas privadas más grandes del mundo. Fabrican productos como vasos desechables Dixie, toallas de papel Brownie, licra y alfombras Stainmaster. Pero su negocio más lucrativo es el del petróleo y la gasolina, que ayuda a Koch Industries a tener ingresos anuales de más de $100,000 millones. Juntos, los hermanos Koch podrían haber gastado más dinero que cualquiera en este país para influir en los políticos estadounidenses.
They basically are unprecedented. They influence American politics on a completely different dimension than anybody else.
The minute you walked in the joint, I could see you were a man of distinction, a real big spender.
Millions of dollars Republican politicians.
More than $50 million, for example, to lobby in Washington since 2006.
Good looking, so refined. Say, wouldn't you like to know what's going on in my mind?
As much as $200 million of their own money this year to help defeat President Obama.
Más de la mitad de los miembros actuales de la Cámara de Representantes y el Senado han recibido dinero de Koch.
A little time with me.
In 1980, David Koch actually ran for vice president on the Libertarian ticket.
They count on growing sympathy for their party's single goal, freedom from government.
He did abysmally. The Libertarian ticket got 1% of the vote in America in 1980. What they learned from that is they had to figure out another way to get their ideas to become influential.
Los Koch decidieron usar su dinero para hacer avanzar sus planes. Donaron generosamente a los candidatos políticos, pero lo más importante fue que invirtieron fuertemente en grupos que pudieron hacer más populares sus ideas antigubernamentales. Los hermanos donaron millones a centros de investigación política de derecha y Charles incluso fundó uno, el Instituto Libertario Cato.
Government's too big, and it's getting bigger, and we don't want to encourage bigger government. Take the keys to the liquor cabinet away from the alcoholics.
Los Koch también dieron enormes cheques a universidades para que apoyaran programas que promovieran la liberalización y la economía de libre mercado.
Their free market ideology, they argue, is just about principle, but there are many, many areas in which their business interests butt into regulations.
Las normas ambientales han sido especialmente malas para los resultados de los Koch, que han recibido numerosas multas de la Agencia de Protección Ambiental.
We are talking about millions of gallons of crude oil being released into the environment.
En 2000, Koch Industries tuvieron que pagar una multa de $30 millones por su parte en más de 30 derrames de petróleo. En esa época fue la mayor penalización civil en la historia de la Agencia de Protección Ambiental.
When you make businesses less competitive because they're having to deal with regulations from the Environmental Protection Agency and other unelected bureaucracies, instead of creating jobs and instead of being able to compete with our foreign competitors, we know it kills jobs.
Él es Tim Phillips, el director de la última aventura de los hermanos Koch, Americans for Prosperity.
We're genuinely fighting to preserve and expand economic freedom, which we believe is the best way to give folks from every walk of life prosperity and a shot at a better life.
A través de Americans for Prosperity, los Koch han brindado un enorme apoyo financiero al movimiento Tea Party, organizando rallies y protestas, llevando a gente importante a dar discursos.
Don't tax us anymore.
E inundando a los medios con anuncios.
Wasteful spending must stop. Go to spendingcrisis.org to make your voice heard.
People were looking at the Tea Party movement as this sort of spontaneous combustion, this grassroots thing that just exploded, and what it really was something that was being fed by libertarian billionaires.
We want the maximum freedom to launch businesses, create opportunity, and expand prosperity. We desire a tax code that does not punish hard work or crush the entrepreneurial spirit that makes America unique in the world.
They have this ideology of the free market and how it making money equals freedom. And if you listen to the Tea Party rhetoric, you hear exactly the same phrases.
Our side and the side you're on today is the side, frankly, of freedom.
They're chanting liberty and chanting no more taxes.
Freedom, liberty, and people waking up to the fact that this is our country and it's up to us to take it back.
Our rights are being taken away, little by little.
Pero ¿de qué clase de libertad habla Americans for Prosperity? ¿Es libertad para todos o solo para los multimillonarios que quieren librarse de los impuestos? ¿Libertad para contaminar y estar libres de cualquier responsabilidad con el resto de la sociedad? Para responder esa pregunta, vayan a uno de los rallies, donde es probable que vean letreros que promueven a una filósofa y novelista alguna vez desprestigiada, que recientemente encontró un nuevo público.
Here in the United States, perhaps the most challenging and unusual new philosophy has been forged by a novelist, Ayn Rand. Miss Rand's point of view is still comparatively unknown in America, but if it ever did take hold, it would revolutionize our lives.
I am opposed to all forms of control. I am for an absolute, laissez-faire, free, unregulated economy.
Ayn Rand wrote a series of novels that have become a kind of touchstone for contemporary Republican politicians, most notably Atlas Shrugged.
There's Atlas. He holds the world on his shoulders. What if Atlas shrugged?
Picture this, an anti-utopia society that collapses under government control. Does this sound familiar? It should. It's Ayn Rand's story of Atlas Shrugged, And now it's a movie, one very popular with Tea Party members.
La rebelión de Atlas trata de un Estados Unidos donde los negocios están regulados, los ricos pagan impuestos y el gobierno trata de ayudar a las clases media y baja. En otras palabras, el peor de los panoramas. En el mundo de Rand, cualquiera que necesite un poco de ayuda en la vida es un parásito, y cualquiera que quiera ayudar a los demás es un villano. Sus héroes se enorgullecen de ser lo más egoístas posible.
You really don't care about helping the underprivileged, do you? No, Philip, I don't.
Finalmente, los directores ejecutivos de Estados Unidos se hartan de vivir bajo un gobierno que ya no los apoya y deciden hacer una huelga.
What are you selling, pal?
Nothing. I'm simply offering a society that cultivates individual achievement.
Se dirigen a las montañas e inician una nueva sociedad que no tiene gobierno. La rebelión de Atlas es contada como una historia de terror, una visión de pesadilla de lo que le pasaría a nuestro país si los estadounidenses ricos como David Koch y Steve Schwarzman nos dejaran y tuviéramos que arreglárnoslas solos.
Yeah, we supported. We had screenings around the country, and we like that story to be out there, and we like the ideas to be out there. And we certainly believe and share many of the principles and values that book was based on, the inherent morality of capitalism.
You do not like the altruism by which we live.
Who say that I don't like is too weak a word. I consider it evil.
The appeal of Ayn Rand is that, it's basically the Gordon Gekko message. Greed is good. That ideology is appealing, I suppose. If you have a tremendous amount of money, you might feel guilty otherwise.
How does your philosophy translate itself into the world of politics?
We believe that America deserves a choice of two futures. We believe that what we are going
Paul Ryan recibe más dinero de los hermanos Koch que cualquier otro miembro del Congreso. También es el político más poderoso del país, que aceptaba públicamente la filosofía de Ayn Rand. Por sus puntos de vista antigubernamentales, este republicano de Wisconsin se convirtió en un favorito del Tea Party, un poderoso miembro del Congreso y un candidato a un alto cargo. Ahora que su fama ha crecido, Ryan niega su simpatía hacia Ayn Rand. Pero la historia dice algo diferente.
I just want to speak to you a little bit about Ayn Rand and what she meant to me in my life and the fight we're engaged here in Congress. The reason I got involved in public service, by and large, if I had to credit one thinker, one person, it would be Ayn Rand.
You believe that there should be no right by the government to tax. You believe that there should be no such thing as welfare legislation, unemployment compensation. How do we build roads, sanitation facilities, hospitals, schools?
I believe in private roads, private post offices, private schools.
It's so important that we go back to our roots to look at Ayn Rand's vision, her writings, to see what our undergrounding principles are. We have to go back to Ayn Rand.
Our plan takes power away from Washington and gives it back to the individual.
En el Congreso, Ryan puso en práctica la filosofía de Ayn Rand, mediante un plan que llamó El Camino a la Prosperidad. Era una propuesta presupuestaria que recortaría dramáticamente los programas gubernamentales para los pobres, disminuyendo aún más los impuestos de los ricos.
I think that the path to prosperity that Chairman Ryan and his committee have put together is a blueprint for America's future.
El Camino a la Prosperidad fue aprobado por la Cámara de Representantes en marzo de 2012. Ahora parece ser el centro de la filosofía económica del Partido Republicano.
What do you think of Ryan's budget framework?
Oh, I think it's ridiculous on the face of it. He's proposing a $10 trillion tax cut as part of his deficit reduction plan. And obviously, if you're going to cut taxes by $10 trillion, you've got to cut spending by even more than $10 trillion. Every program you can possibly think of, from roads to education to energy, would be more or less abolished if you're going to take seriously the numbers that he has put forward.
The idea that there's legitimate economics behind this is absurd. Conservatives throughout the ages have never spoken like Paul Ryan. Milton Friedman talked about negative income tax and guaranteed incomes for the poor. Friedrich Hayek, who is one of the acmes of free market economics, talked about the need of societies to guarantee minimum standards and provide health care.
So there's clearly an ideology involved here. They actually want to use tax policy to eviscerate government programs.
My mom used to say to me, son, it don't matter where you begin. What matters is where you end. You live in the United States of America. And that's something that I think is an inherently moral thing about America. It gives you a chance to make it.
Much of what they say is about providing opportunity to make money to everybody equally. That's what they would argue about. That it doesn't seem to accept the possibility that if you're poor enough and your schooling is bad enough, that you don't really have an opportunity to compete.
Casi todo el mundo está de acuerdo en que la educación es la clave para la movilidad social ascendente. Para la gente que empieza abajo en la escala social, una carrera universitaria puede cuadruplicar sus posibilidades de llegar a la cima, pero la universidad es cada vez menos accesible. El costo ha aumentado más de 500% desde 1980. Mientras tanto, sin una carrera universitaria, es más difícil que nunca conseguir empleo. Si uno solo tiene un diploma de bachillerato, hay 70% de posibilidades de que no se consiga trabajo de tiempo completo. Es una cruel ironía que la economía de Estados Unidos tenga la necesidad desesperada de trabajo calificado en la industria manufacturera, la de la alta tecnología y la de la salud. Pero no hay suficientes trabajadores calificados para estos empleos. Aún con 12 millones de estadounidenses que no pueden conseguir empleo, los programas de capacitación y educación son recortados por los dos partidos para favorecer la disminución de impuestos a los ricos.
I find it hard to be an optimist right now for people whom I care about and people who the Poverty Institute cares about, people who want to support their families through work and can't.
Actualmente, 1 de cada 7 estadounidenses recibe cupones de comida. Más de la mitad de esta gente son niños y ancianos. 41% de quienes los reciben viven en una casa. 1 o más miembros trabajan. Un empleo ya no es suficiente para mantener a los estadounidenses fuera de la pobreza.
For the people that think, okay, they don't need anything, they don't need a handout, they should just go get a job. Yes, as soon as they create jobs for people to get them, then great. I'm pretty sure they'll be there. There's nothing. So what do you do when there's nothing? That's where the safety net comes in.
Pero no solo los pobres están batallando en Estados Unidos. En el estado de Paul Ryan, Wisconsin, muchos residentes que alguna vez fueron de clase media ahora tienen dificultades para satisfacer sus necesidades básicas. En el pudiente condado de Waukesha, más de 6,000 personas acuden a este almacén de comida cada mes.
We're seeing more individuals and families that have high education levels and professional training, more so than any other time in our history.
The vegetable with beef. My husband lost his job, and so we are working off one income. And we also have a 6-year-old who has a medical condition, so it gets a little expensive with that as well. I would say if we didn't have it, we probably wouldn't get a lot of the things that we need.
When you're on unemployment, you're supposed to apply for work 2 places a week, and I was applying every day. I ran out of places to apply to. I would apply at even McDonald's. They never even called me back. I'm hoping our politicians are smart enough to keep these programs. What worries me is when they say they want to cut government spending, I'm thinking low-income housing, because it's all a waste to them. But I don't think they realize how essential it is to us. You know, they make money. They don't have to worry about that. And 9 times out of 10, they've come from wealthy backgrounds. They have no clue what it's like to be this. And until you've been there, it's a whole different ballgame.
La propuesta de Paul Ryan recortaría $134,000 millones al programa de cupones de comida en los próximos 10 años, lo que podría acabar con los programas de protección social para 8 millones de personas.
Our nation is approaching a tipping point. We're at a moment where if government's growth is left unchecked and unchallenged, America's best century will be considered our past century. This is a future in which we will transform our social safety net into a hammock.
You can hear Paul Ryan talk about his hammock. This hammock, the average benefit in Wisconsin was $246 a month last year for 2 people, about $350 for 4. Is that enough for you to say, put my feet up in the hammock, I got these food stamps? Feeding people is something that this country can afford to do and should be able to do. That's not a hammock.
And if you try to raise our taxes and trample on our liberties, we're either going to beat you or make your life miserable.
The government has been starved of funds. We're at about the lowest tax collection as a share of national income in our modern history. We can't even pay for the most basic public services right now. We can't keep our schools functioning. We can't keep our roads intact. Taxes are the price you pay for civilization. And if you don't pay taxes, you don't get civilization. It's as simple as that.
Las tasas tributarias para los millonarios han bajado más de 25% en las últimas 2 décadas, y para unos cuantos individuos extremadamente ricos, los impuestos han bajado casi 50%. Gran parte de esa disminución es por los recortes de impuestos legislados por el presidente George W. Bush. Bush bajó 15% la tasa sobre las ganancias de capital en inversiones, casi la mitad de la tasa durante el mandato de Donald Reagan. Los recortes de impuestos de Bush añadieron más de $2.9 billones a la deuda nacional. La propuesta de recorte de impuestos de Paul Ryan añadiría otros $4.6 billones a la deuda en los próximos 10 años. Lo que es difícil de entender de esta incansable presión por recortar impuestos a los ricos es que ellos ya tienen mucho más que el resto de nosotros. En 1965, los directores ejecutivos ganaban aproximadamente 20 veces más que el trabajador promedio. Hoy en día, según el cálculo más prudente, ese número ha ascendido a 231. ¿Qué está pasando aquí? ¿Los directores ejecutivos están ganando más porque lo merecen? Él es otro residente del 740 de Park Avenue, John Thane, el director ejecutivo mejor pagado de 2007.
Thane's apartment is actually my personal favorite for if I could live at 740 Park. It's a little tiny jewel box duplex. It's got 4 exposures, and it's on the Central Park side of the building.
Thane fue un alto funcionario en Goldman Sachs y fue director ejecutivo de la Bolsa de Nueva York antes de convertirse en el director del banco de inversiones Merrill Lynch. En 2008, al dispararse las pérdidas y caer en picada las acciones de esta empresa, Thane estaba ocupado con la remodelación de su oficina de $1.2 millones.
You spent more than $1 million renovating your office. Is this true?
It was my office, it was 2 conference rooms, and it was a reception area. But it is clear to me, in today's world, that it was a mistake. I apologize for spending that money on those things.
Mientras Thane estaba ocupado eligiendo sillas, alfombras y botes de basura, Merrill y los otros bancos de inversiones ayudaron a derribar la economía global.
Wall Street has been turned upside down.
The collapse of one investment bank, the takeover of another.
$29 billion to help J.P. Morgan
$85 billion to bail out the insurance giant AIG.
Wall Street fue rescatado por los contribuyentes a través de auxilio financiero y préstamos del gobierno que casi no tenían intereses.
I'm confident that this rescue plan, along with other measures taken by the Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve, will begin to restore strength and stability to America's financial system and overall economy.
Mientras tanto, bajo los mandatos de los presidentes Bush y Obama, millones de estadounidenses de clase media que enfrentaban ejecuciones hipotecarias recibieron solo una pequeñísima fracción del auxilio financiero que se les dio a los banqueros ricos. Merrill Lynch perdió más de $27 mil millones bajo el liderazgo de Thane y fue vendido a Bank of America. Thane entregó $3.6 mil millones en bonos por cumplimiento de metas a los ejecutivos de Merrill.
The bonuses were paid even as Merrill suffered $15 billion in losses.
If you live in a world where everyone you know is chasing huge sums of money every day, and their morality is determined by what it's necessary to do to get richer and richer and richer, you're not going to have the same moral constructs affecting your behavior.
When I started at 740, I was like, this is great, you know, come around to Christmas time, I'm gonna get 1,000 from each resident, you know, because they are multi-billionaires. But it's not that way, you know. These guys are businessmen. They know what the going rate is. They're not gonna give you anything more than that. The cheapest person overall was David Koch. We would load up his trucks, 2 vans usually, every weekend for the Hamptons. You know, I mean, multiple trips, multiple guys, in and out, heavy bags. We would never get a tip from Mr. Koch. We would never get a smile from Mr. Koch. $50 check for Christmas.
A check?
A check, too, yeah. I mean, at least you could give us cash.
Just because you're rich doesn't make you smart. Just because you're rich doesn't make you cultured. Just because you're rich doesn't make you refined. Being rich means you're rich. Some rich people are just dicks.
Steven Schwartzman unleashed a disgusting comparison over the administration's effort to increase taxes. He said, quote, "It's a war. It's like when Hitler invaded Poland in 1939.
In thousands of different people that we've studied across the country, the more you have, the more entitled and deserving of those things you feel. And that might account in part for the vitriol that you see when people feel like their privileged position is being undermined by others.
Since when in this country was it okay to demonize success?
The free enterprise system is under attack.
Back to the old populist, demonize the rich.
You know, the Republicans are always complaining about the Democrats playing class warfare.
The Democratic Party is going to have to stop bashing the rich.
But they do it themselves by, for example, they're always quick to point out that something like half of all people who file individual income tax returns have either a zero or a negative tax liability.
We have a system today in the United States where 45% of Americans don't pay any income tax. You have to have skin in the game.
Over 45% of the people in this country don't pay income taxes at all, and we have to question whether that's fair.
Those are people who don't pay income taxes, okay? It includes all elderly women living alone who just have enough Social Security they don't even declare. It includes disabled people who don't have earnings. But all of those people pay payroll taxes, sales taxes, property taxes.
State and local taxes, gasoline taxes, liquor taxes.
This is ridiculous to say low-income people don't pay taxes. They do pay taxes. And they pay a lot of them.
If you can take the resentment of the middle class and point it downward rather than having it point upward to the people on the top of the 1% who are really, walking away richer than ever, then you can succeed politically. And I think they've been very good at that.
We are in very real danger that the American dream is slipping from the grasp of the next generation.
Este evento de caridad es la oportunidad para que los neoyorquinos adinerados den un poco de sus fortunas a los pobres. En la última década, Stephen Schwarzman ha dado más de $7 millones para el fondo de becas de las zonas marginales de Nueva York.
I worry that the social fabric of America is being ripped purposefully by people who are taking advantage of individuals who are suffering.
El señor Schwarzman parece ser empático con quienes viven en la pobreza. Pero curiosamente, siendo uno de los principales capitalistas de Estados Unidos, no parece entender que a diferencia de Monopoly, el verdadero capitalismo es un juego que dura por siempre. Por cada gran ganador, hay muchos perdedores. La riqueza se crea, pero también la pobreza. Sin la democracia popular, todas las ganancias de nuestra economía irían a la clase más alta.
I'm from Michigan. This is where our money is. People lost their homes in the banking and mortgage crisis, and it went here.
There's nothing wrong with being rich. God wants all his children to be rich. But don't be rich and at a place where you ain't thinking about anybody else.
They feel they need not $10 billion, but $20 billion of wealth. They get that extra wealth by twisting politics, buying politicians. America became a place where money buys everything.
Los ricos son vistos a menudo como ejemplos vivientes de lo que es posible en Estados Unidos, como una prueba de que todo el mundo puede triunfar. ¿Pero aún hay un puente para la oportunidad económica en este país? Cuando vemos el río que separa los dos Park Avenues, ¿vemos un canal hacia la prosperidad para todos? o una barrera que evita que los pobres lo atraviesen. Mientras los líderes políticos dependan de los ricos para ganar las elecciones y mantenerse en el poder, harán leyes para proteger los castillos de riqueza y poder al otro lado de este río. Un río que se ha convertido en un pozo profundo y prohibido. Las siguientes personas se negaron a ser entrevistadas o no respondieron a varias invitaciones: David Koch, Charles Koch, Paul Ryan, Charles Schumer, Scott Walker, Stephen Schwarzman, John Thane. Narrado en español por José Luis Palomera de la Re, con la colaboración de Liliana Torres y América Nieves.